Think you've heard about the greatest heist in American history? If you're picturing high-tech gadgets, thrilling car chases, or some Hollywood-style mastermind with a digital blueprint, think again. What if I told you that one of the most brilliant, daring robberies of all time didn't involve any of that? Just 11 men, simple disguises, and one cold January night. In the 1950, this crew walked into a Boston depot, emptied a vault, and vanished into thin air with millions of dollars, leaving the police and the entire country scratching their heads. This is the story of the Great Brink Robbery, a heist so perfectly executed that it nearly went unsolved. Stick around, because by the end, you might just start wondering, did these men actually get away with it? Tony Pino wasn't just any criminal. He was smart, calculating, and always thinking ahead. He knew that to pull off something as big as this, he'd need more than just luck. He'd need a team of highly skilled professionals. So, he began recruiting men who were experts at what they did. Experts in breaking locks, disabling alarms, and moving in and out without leaving a trace. These weren't random men off the streets. These were seasoned criminals who knew the value of patience and planning. And with this team, Tony wasn't just thinking about any small-time job. He was planning something that had never been done before, something that people would talk about for years to come. Tony's team knew they had to play it cool and avoid suspicion, so they didn't rush. They were patient, observant, and meticulous. But why? What were they waiting for? It turns out they were after a single perfect moment, one that only they would recognize. The plan took 18 long months to put together. Over those months, Tony and his gang watched the Brink's armored car depot in the Boston's North End neighborhood like hawks. They observed the security guards' every move, studying their shift changes, learning which doors were locked and which were left open, and mapping out every inch of the building. This was no rush job. It was a long game, and they were prepared to play it to perfection. Tony and his crew were to get the information they wanted. They had to go undercover. They even wore different masks, sometimes pretending to be the guards in a bid to know if anyone would detect them. This is where they learned to be discreet and how to blend in the group. They paid attention to the smallest of details possible, right from the time each of the guards went for a break to which way each of them moved. And as the months went by, they accumulated all the equipment they would need on that day, the special day. They bought themselves navy pea coats and chauffeur caps so as to blend in with the official staff, and Halloween masks so none of the passengers would ever remember seeing them. This was not just about entering and exiting. It was about a robbery so precise and well planned that nobody would see it coming. It had a technicality that would nag people's minds. They had one shot and they knew it. There was no room for error, but with all their prep, even the smallest slip-up could still send the whole thing crashing down. So, what were they banking on? What would make this night different from all the others? The night they had waited for finally came. The date was the January 17th, 1950. It was dusky and cold. In the last meeting, the gang members discussed every minor detail of action that has to be taken. What made it more thrilling was the fact that they only had one chance, one attempt to get into this big robbery. There would be no way of making mistakes. Every man had his part prepared, and as routine dictated, there was no room for any mistake on the part of any man. Without a sound, like the ghosts, they moved closer to the Brink's depot. This was it, the final that everyone had been waiting for. With only minutes remaining before it was closed for business, the gang struck. They moved into the building dressed like guards in navy blue pea jackets and chauffeur caps, but their faces were concealed by Halloween masks. From inside, only a few workers were still at work and were totally clueless about the developments about to occur. For a few moments, everything was still and quiet, and then the employees stood face to face with the barrels of the guns. They had no choice but to obey the intruders, who clearly meant business. The gang wasted no time. They forced the employees to lay on the floor, tied their hands and feet, and put tapes on their mouths so that they couldn't shout for assistance. The employees could only look on in terror, praying that they will get out of this alive. The employees being now quiet, the gang proceeded to the vault. They had planned every inch and every step, and they knew that the door to the vault would be open. It was finally the moment they trained for, and no way in hell were they going to lose it. In the vault, there were heaps of currency notes, heaps of the checks, and heaps of money orders. The gang worked like lightning and were quick to pack whatever they could carry in their bags. They realized that time was not on their side, that the police could arrive at any given time, but they did not lose their heads and took as much money as they could carry and then tied and gagged the employees on the floor. It took it less than 30 minutes, and it was all done. The gang had disappeared, left into the unknown territory of the black streets of Boston, each of them with a bag full of money. There had been no blaring of sirens, no one had been injured, and they had not even littered the area with debris as if they were never there. It was was, as everyone would agree, the crime of the century. But as they would soon find out, there is no crime that is perfect in this world. They vanished into the night, leaving no trace behind, or so they thought, but they missed something that would come back to haunt them. Can you guess what it was? The following morning, Boston woke up to a rude shock. The Brinks depot had been burglarized and $2.7 million had been stolen. That's around $30 million in today's money, a fortune beyond most people's wildest dreams. It was the biggest cash robbery in the history of the United States, and the police were on the rampage. Cops and FBI agents rushed in, scrambling for anything that might lead them to the perpetrators of the crime. But they found very little. What remained of the gang was a few strips of tape and some rope on the floor. They had been so conscious, so cautious, that it looked as if they would pull it off. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. It turns out, the gang didn't just pull off the heist and disappear. No, they actually got close to being caught not once, but twice, within just weeks of the robbery. But each time, luck was on their side. Once, a rookie officer happened to be right outside the depot as they slipped away, but he thought nothing of it. Then, only a week later, police found a stash of costumes and tools that matched descriptions of the heist gear, but it wasn't linked to the gang until years later. It was as if fate itself wanted to keep them hidden for a while. The police and FBI began a large-scale operation. They spent day and night interrogating any person that might be of help, wiretapping, installing bugs, and following every single lead. But as the days became weeks, and the weeks became months, they realized that they were no nearer to arresting the gang. Tony and his crew had been very wise. They kept off the radar and waited for the storm to blow over. He and the others understood that if they attempted to spend the money at that time, it would attract attention. That is why they decided to conceal the money and wait until the investigation was over and done with. The public, on the other hand, was interested. The Brinks robbery was all over the papers, and people could not believe how well the gang had planned and executed the robbery. This was like a real-life script of a Hollywood movie where daring criminals had outwitted all those who were against them. However, for the police, it was not a movie, but a real case, and they could not leave it without a solution. It increased as the years went by. The days, hours, minutes were passing by, and if the gang was not caught by the authorities, they would be free for the rest of their lives. The police and FBI understood that they had to act fast, or else the criminals would be impossible to trace. However, it appeared that the case would soon cool off, but then a breakthrough was achieved at last. By the help of informants and a little luck and detective work, the FBI was finally able to get a lead. Almost 6 years after the crime to be committed for the FBI to apprehend 8 of the men who pulled off the Brinks job. Each one was arrested and taken in for interrogation. The mystery of the Brinks job was slowly coming out of the veil, but even as the gang members faced trial, one question lingered. Where was all the money? Of the $2.7 million stolen, only some of it was ever recovered. The rest had vanished, somewhere in Boston, or with the gangsters who were not caught by the police. To this day, people are asking themselves if there is still a buried treasure of Brinks money somewhere out there. The trials were rigorous, with the FBI laying down pieces of evidence to demonstrate to the world what these men were willing to do to execute the robbery, and one by one the members of the gang were arrested and tried and sentenced. They had been remembered as the people who had masterminded one of the biggest heists in history, but now they would suffer. The Great Brinks Robbery was more than just a robbery. It was a heist. It was a sign of criminal ingenuity, a tale of how far individuals would go in a pursuit of wealth. It showed the world that no matter how well a plan is made, it will always come apart in the end. And today, over 70 years later, the story of the Brinks job remains a popular one among people of the world. It is a statement about the nature of crime and law enforcement, about the difference between those who plot the unthinkable and those who attempt to prevent it. The next time you are in Boston strolling through the North End, you will think of this story behind the Great Brinks Robbery. It is a story of courage, greed, and intrigue, a story of the heist that was almost perfect, the heist of the century. And who knows, perhaps there is a box of money somewhere, now covered by asphalt and concrete, belonging to the Brinks gang. If you think we missed a detail, make sure to remind us in the comments. If you enjoyed watching the video, press the like button and make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you never miss out on another amazing crime story. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.